Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled, "We have built an aircraft that pilots cannot crash." Yeah, interesting quote. That was a quote made to me by a senior vice president of Airbus, a test pilot, who was much more of a marketing individual, I will say, than what I would call an engineer. Because I told him when he made that comment, I says, I don't think an aircraft will ever be built that you won't find some very ingenious airline pilot who will find a way to crash it. And he goes, oh, no, no, no. And it first flew in 22nd February of 1987, and I was invited out there on a test flight shortly after that, and it was some very aggressive maneuvering, which was kind of fun. We didn't have passengers on board, so we did some very aggressive things, like you break ground and you pull the stick full back to the corner, which gives you full go-around thrust, toga, and you climb in a 67-degree bank, and you go down to the minimum alpha floor speed, which was very impressive. Okay, so we did a lot of aggressive maneuvering, and well, I gave you the history there. It first flew in 22nd February of '87. Air France brought it into service in April of '88, and the very first crash was in Air France at the air show on 26 June 1988. So the uncrashable airplane had a very short lifespan. Now, let's talk about this thing. Early on, Lufthansa was going to be one of the early customers, and this same test pilot was interviewed on German TV, and he made comments about, this airplane was so simple to fly, it was uncrashable, that a monkey could fly it. And he talked about the operation, monkey doing monkey things, very easy to do. Needless to say, the Lufthansa pilots did not take lightly to this. Lufthansa pilots did not like being referred to as monkeys. Now, there's an advantage of monkeys. They probably work at a lower pay rate, and you can feed them bananas and they're all happy. But no, this airplane was a little more complex and even accident prone than Airbus let on in their very early marketing days. Now, just so you know, I like the Airbus. And I flew test flights on all the Airbus aircraft except for the 380. I was out of being chairman of the new aircraft valuation and certification committee for ALPA. Actually, one of my committee members later became a test pilot for Airbus. I had a great group of guys on my committee, and I'm going to talk about that in another video. But I had a great group of guys, and one of them went to be an Airbus test pilot, and he flew the 380. But getting back to it, I liked the Airbus. I flew in commercial service, I flew the 320, the 319. In test flights, I flew the 318, 19, 20, 21, 330, and 340, and various submodels of those aircraft. So I like the Airbus. In fact, I did a checkout of my son on the aircraft, and it got into the local newspaper, father and son flying together. And I liked the airplane so much, felt it was safe enough that, heck, I brought my wife along on my son's checkout here. That's obviously my wife in the center, me on the left side, and my son on the right. Well, after the initial 320, Airbus, of course, made a bunch of derivative aircraft, and one of the first ones was the 321. And in 1994, that's me there in front of the engine there with Nick, I flew the 321 on a test flight. And Nick was a super guy, very pragmatic. And by then, the shine had come off the apple, and Airbus wasn't quite as willing to say that their aircraft was uncrashable. But there were still a lot of holes. And I flew with Nick on the 321 and also on the 340. Of course, in this intervening time, there had been a couple of crashes. And I wrote up these flight evaluations in the Airline Pilots Association, and it came out in 1994. And one of the things I quoted Nick here was talking about the Indian airline accidents, and he said they found a hole in the protection. Yeah, they did. They found a hole. People were finding a number of holes, and I will discuss these accidents in detail in other presentations. But unfortunately, Nick almost found a hole. Also found a hole. And this was a very unfortunate hole. It was a test flight, and Nick and the other pilots on board were killed. The hole on this one, and I'm going to describe it. To me, it's an extremely egregious hole that I just simply could not believe that Airbus would allow. But it was a hole that led to this aircraft going uncontrollable and crashing. And like I said, I'll discuss that. Now, I like the side stick. I thought the side sticks were nice. They were comfortable. They were enjoyable. I liked having a tray table there, and as one of the Air France pilots told me when I was jump seating from Paris down to Toulouse to do a flight evaluation, he told me that the tray table would hold the weight of a Air France flight attendant. He also was demonstrating some other aspects of the aircraft. Now, this is a passenger flight, but he's demonstrating, and he was demonstrating a descent, and he got into the high-speed protection where it started an automatic pitch up because he was about to overspeed the aircraft. And he kind of made a mention that, the flight attendant will complain that I'm exerting forces on part of her anatomical structure that would not be comfortable. Well, I don't speak French other than Dulot, ou la toilette, things like that. But shortly after this occurred, there was a knock on the cockpit door, and one of the young flight attendants came in, and she was making a hand gesture that I could tell she was not happy. She was kind of joking about it, but she was criticizing her for criticizing the pilot for putting undue stress on an anatomical part. Now, there are things that I really liked about the flight control laws. And United Airlines at the time, they had a standardization of how you would do a controlled flight into terrain recovery. If you got a ground proximity warning, you were supposed to smoothly rotate to 15 degrees, advance power, retract speed brakes, that sort of thing, and hold 15 degrees. And I had done a bunch of flight tests on this, looking at various recovery maneuvers, and I did the 15-degree recovery maneuver, and I did the you just take and pull the stick full back recovery maneuver and jam the throttles full forward. And pulling the stick back, and I talked about this in a paper I wrote, pulling the stick back was the way to go. That gave you the best recovery. And I went into the chief pilot, Doug, of Airbus at the Airbus fleet at the time at United Airlines, and I said, "Hey, we're not doing this right. Airbus has a great capability on the CFIT recovery procedure where you just pull the stick back and it'll take care of everything. You won't over-G the aircraft, you won't overstress it, and you will get the best performance." And I showed him the graphs of the flight test data that I had acquired, and he looked at me and says, "Yeah, you're right. We'll change that." And it was like, okay, I'm ready to continue with the argument, counter any points he had, stuff like that. But he just said, "You're right. We'll do that." And I really wasn't prepared for him to agree quite that quickly. But then again, the procedure did get changed. Now, I have a full bin of these pamphlets, and Airbus put out, they put out one on auto thrust. They put out these for each aircraft. They're really nice, nice produced brochures, very, very great marketing tools. And they talk about all the fly-wire protections and all the stuff it does for you, and it keeps the pilot from basically screwing things up. These are called hard protections. The pilot cannot overwrite them. The pilot cannot over-G the aircraft if he wants to, as long as he's in normal law, or what's normal law. And these laws get a little advanced with alternate direct and manual. Although manual isn't quite a law, it's a degradation. But anyway, and I'm going to talk about that in another video. But basically, this is supposed to protect the pilots. Now, Boeing uses soft protections where you get nudges, let's call it that way. But if you need to over-G the aircraft, prevent hitting a mountain, you can do it in the Boeing aircraft. So that's the difference between the two designs, and I talk about this in a paper I wrote about 20 years ago. But in this book, they talk about various things about, should the sticks be interconnected? Well, I thought they should from the training aspect because I can take my fingers and put it on the disc, on the stick, without putting any input into the stick, and I can feel what the guy's doing. And I had a few captains that I was checking out. You'd think it'd be the co-pilot more likely, but a captain who made a very aggressive stick input. We ended up having to go around from the flare basically because it was an extremely over-controlling situation and put the aircraft in a bad state. But there's about a 2.5 second delay from when the input is put in to when the aircraft fully responds, and that's a big delay when you're in something like this. And if I would have felt him put that input in, I could have reacted much quicker. So I felt it would be nice to have the sticks interconnected. But they go on and they say, no, we don't want that. It's not a good idea. We don't think it gives you any value and stuff like that. And I had the test pilots tell me that, no. We didn't even consider it. It's just from the start, that was the design. We're not going to interconnect it. There's absolutely no reason for it. And no, done deal. But this goes on talking about various aspects of the protections in general. And it's quite a marketing thing. Now, I like the stick, but I thought they should be coupled so you could feel the interactions like I mentioned. And I wasn't the only one. The SNPL, which is the French counterpart to Airline Pilots Association, they also had put together presentations, and we had a number of meetings at Airbus where we said, hey, we would like to see these things interconnected. Well, I decided I wanted to get a little ammunition for this. Okay, fine. I was working with some engineers out at NASA Dryden. It's now NASA Armstrong out at Edwards. And I was putting together a test program to evaluate the feasibility, the good and bad aspects of having coupled sticks. And just as a courtesy, I sent my test plan to Airbus. Look it over. Give me any thoughts you might have on the issue. Well, a couple days later, I get a call from Randy Babbitt. He was the president of the Airline Pilots Association at the time, and I knew Randy. We'd worked together on various things. He'd actually accompanied me on a test flight of the ATR 42-500, and so we knew each other. And he calls me up, and he's kind of chuckling. He says, well, I got a call from Airbus. And I go, oh. He says, yeah, they wanted to know if all of ALPA hated Airbus, or if it was just Ron Rogers that hated Airbus. And we were kind of laughed about that. And I go, well, you probably told him it wasn't all of ALPA. And I said, but I don't hate him either. Well, that took a little bit of, unruffling feathers and stuff like that. But they finally kind of agreed that, yeah, okay, you didn't upset us, but we're not happy about you looking into this. But just about that time, I had done a flight evaluation on the 319 in the Airline Pilot Association magazine, and they liked it so much that, and it was funny, the editor of the Airline Pilot magazine called me up and says, well, Airbus must not hate you too much. They just ordered 3,000 reprints of your article out of the Airline Pilot magazine, and all this thing was basically a pamphlet that was my review of the flight evaluation. And I was a little bit critical of the design even in this, but they still wanted to publish it. But like I said, I had written a paper that dealt with the history, the good and the bad aspects of various flight control laws, and kind of laid it out. I did it basically to have a good kind of background outline understanding of the control laws, the development, and it was kind of discussion of, well, there's good and bad parts to both of these ideas. Boeing has one idea, Airbus has another, and I kind of compared them. Well, I was a member of Society of Experimental Test Pilots, and I submitted it as a paper for fun, because I'd written up a paper, so I submitted it. Well, funny thing was, I was waiting for tickets to the banquet that year, and I got a little letter from Society of Experimental Test Pilots. I thought they were the banquet tickets, and my wife opened the mail, and I asked her if these were the banquet tickets, and she says, no, not yet, but you're going to like this. And I go, really, what? And it was a little notice that I had been awarded the Fish Salmon Award for technical publications, the most outstanding technical paper published in cockpit in 1999. So I got this award, and also the paper got some notoriety and distribution. And I also was awarded. This was kind of funny too. I was actually reading the Aviation Week in Space Technology magazine, and I'm thumbing through it, and I come to the Laurels Awards, and I'm reading down it, and I find my name, and I said, Chris, that's my wife's name. He says, you're not going to believe this, but my name is in the magazine. I won this award. And they gave me a Laurels Award in commercial air transport, had to deal with this. So my wife and I go out to the Society of Experimental Test Pilots annual banquet and meeting out there, and I get presented the award there by the MC David Hartman, and that's him on the right, that's my wife in the center, and that's me on the left. And if you're interested in looking at this paper, there is a link to it posted up there. I'm not sure if it's clickable or anything, but that's the link if you're interested. But the interesting thing about this is, I did a number of these test flights, flight evaluations over at Airbus. And of course, the nice thing about this, and as one of the other committee chairmen said, your committee is its own reward. Of course, we'd go fly, which was fun, do test flights. And I had a very detailed test flight program. In fact, John Cashman, the head of the 777 at Airbus, said it was worthy of a certification test flight, and the first flight on the 777 was 5 hours going through this. It was very nice, but these were very detailed things we wanted to see. So we'd go to a test flight, we'd go out to a restaurant in the evening, and of course, be it strange for French test pilots to like to drink wine, and of course there's some English test pilots too, all involved with Airbus. We'd go out and we'd have a few glasses of wine. And of course, you're probably familiar with the term in vitro veritas. Well, we'd get a couple drinks there, and I found out some interesting information. And one of the pieces of information was that, yes, they had looked into coupling the sticks, and they looked into mechanical coupling, and they looked into electrical coupling. And he says, the breakout forces and the friction in the mechanical coupling was just too high. It just didn't work. They couldn't get the forces down light enough to make it work. He says, we looked at it. And he says, in the electrical coupling, and this was back before side sticks had been developed as they are now decades later. They're much more advanced, much more reliable. But back then, they weren't as reliable. And he says, there are certain failure modes that you don't want to see on this. And he says, just be careful what you wish for. So I kind of got a nice little intro, and there was a number of other things I'm going to tell you about the design and things that were discovered in flight test, because flight test always discovers fun things. But I'll talk about those on another video. But basically, they said, yeah, we tried it. We didn't like it. So, we understand your position. And, if they'd have been a little more forthright with me initially, it would have been nicer. But Airbus was a little difficult to deal with in the fact that if you criticize their design, it was virtually like you were spitting on the French flag. I mean, they took it very personally and very badly. Okay. Well, we got over that. They forgave me in the long run, I guess. But I think the point I made that, pilots will find a way to crash it, and there will be holes in your protection, you just don't know what they are, did come to fruition. And I will talk about these. And I will talk about these in detail. This was the first one at the air show where Alpha Floor really didn't protect you. And I'm going to talk about this in detail. Then after that, there was another one where they got into a low-speed situation. Here's a situation where the aircraft knew better than the pilot whether it was on the ground or not. This is the unfortunate one with Nick Warner. Nick Warner was a British test pilot and a super guy, and this protection hole was it was amazing. I could not believe that the aircraft could get it into this state where the flight control system would essentially take the aircraft into a position where it was unrecoverable, and it was unrecoverable. And then, of course, Air France Flight 447. that went down in the Atlantic. This is a very complicated situation that could have been solved either by having a PhD in flight control systems or flying pitch and power. And of course, you know, we can always revert back to the flying monkeys. And of course, Germans have an affinity for monkey, German comedians. But all in all, I'm fairly certain that I can get the Lufthansa pilots to agree that they will never like having monkeys in their cockpits flying their airplanes, even if at one time a very senior Airbus test pilot thought they could do just fine. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found it informative.